It's that time of year where it's 70 degrees on Saturday and then snowing on Sunday night.
Kind of reminds me of somewhere else we've been. Just keep watching to find out.
Welcome to Around the World with Joshua and Alyssa. We welcome you to week number 6.
Woohoo!
We just got done with the story of Tifam last week. It was a very exciting ending. And we have a new story today, but we're not going to get into that quite yet. We talked about the Philippines for the last 5 weeks, and now for the next 2 or 3 weeks we're going to talk about Ecuador. We were there for about 2 weeks. And so we're going to tell you about some of the things we experienced while we were there. So, let's get right into it.
Maybe we should show them where Ecuador is on a map.
Sure, go ahead and do that.
Let's do that. So, we live in North America. We live in Minnesota. Remember, this is not perfectly accurate, but you get the general idea. Ecuador is in South America, down here. It's kind of up here on the upper coast part of South America. So, we are talking about Ecuador, right where the equator hits, hence the name, Ecuador. So, let's look at some pictures from Ecuador.
Ecuador is where Alyssa started learning how to do photography.
Oh yeah.
That's why this picture's here. For those of you who know a little bit about cameras, that strap doesn't go with that camera, I just noticed that. But that's really specific. We don't need to talk about that. Let's get into Ecuador. Here we go. Flying into Ecuador. We were in 2 of the main cities in Ecuador. One of them was Quito, the capital, and one of them was Cuenca, up farther in the north. So as we go through this and we talk about Ecuador, some places in Ecuador may be a little different than where we were. So keep that in mind. We can only speak from experience from these 2 places. There may be other places that things are a little different than what we experienced. So this is flying into Quito. It is in a valley surrounded by mountains and volcanoes. Let's look at another view from the sky. Here you can really get a good look at the mountain ranges. And here's a picture of a volcano. And it is blowing steam in this picture while we were there. This wasn't dangerous. Actually, one of the most active volcanoes in the world, I believe, is right there near Quito. You can actually climb up and see it. It doesn't explode all over the place. It just, kind of this thing. Just keeps blowing hot air.
It's not too far from the airport, pretty sure.
Yeah.
You could see
correct.
it once you got out of the airport.
Yep. It was one of the things we actually thought about doing, and then we ran out of time, was hiking up there. Not all the way up, but hiking on this mountain. We just didn't have the time to go do it. Now, when you think of Ecuador and a country that's being right on the equator, which is that line, invisible line around the world that is supposedly the hottest part of the surface of the earth, and you see pictures of this, you think, oh, Ecuador must be really hot there. You're right. It is really hot there.
Sometimes.
Yeah. This is a picture I think we took in the airport. Here's a picture at a camp that we were at, and you can see the green grass, the trees, the beautiful sunset. Looks nice and warm. Here's a picture of Alyssa on one of the mountains that we did climb with a group of people, and we're going to talk about that adventure
That's a good story.
another time. But look, she has her sleeves rolled up. She's looking like it's hot outside. It was. We were pretty sweaty. But in Quito, even though it can get up to what, like 80, 90 degrees in the daytime, at night it could get down to 50s. Did it get down to 40s? I thought
It got pretty chilly.
It was.
I didn't have like a
cold.
thermometer.
Like when they told us what it was in Fahrenheit, I was actually pretty surprised that it got that cold.
Yeah.
It was at least 50s that it got down to. And we were quite surprised. We're trying to bundle up at night because it was so chilly. I wasn't prepared for that. I didn't bring quite the right stuff for staying warm at night. But Cuenca was a lot like that too. Here in Cuenca, at this camp that we were at, you can see all the people there are bundled up at night in a building for the evening service. And here's another one, all bundled up, wearing their heavy clothes.
But it was chilly, and it was kind of a damp cold a little bit.
Because it's the humidity there. So yeah, I wasn't quite expecting that from when I was going there. I think of like Minnesota or Iowa, where I grew up. You know, one day you'll have 80 degrees, the next day it'll be 40s, and 2 days later you'll have snow, and then a week later it'll be 90 degrees. But here in Ecuador, we had days where it would be like a 40-degree difference in one day.
Kind of like spring/fall, where you dress one way in the morning and at night, and then in the afternoon you're kind of like pulling off layers just to adjust.
Yeah, so that was, I don't know if a lot of Ecuador is like that, but at least where we were in Quito and Cuenca, Quito especially, with it being in the valley, it just collects all that heat during the day, and then at night it loses it all. And so it was a big difference there. Next week, to give you something to look forward to, we're going to talk about the markets that we went to in those two cities. This picture has some of my favorite fruits, mangoes. There's also some pears there, some apples maybe. Are those peaches or apricots? Or oh, there's kiwis in the background. Grapes. Anyway, there's a lot more than just fruit at the market. We're going to look at some of the other things they sold. So you'll have to come back and see us next week as we talk about the markets. All right. Are you ready for our new missionary story? Yeah. I know I am. This is also a story that took place in Ecuador, but in a little different situation. And you'll find that out as Alyssa shares it with us. So, go ahead.
Thanks.
And I will come back in just a moment.
Yep. Also, don't forget, we've hidden something new in our setup today. So if you figure it out, go ahead and put it in the comments below so we know that you found it. And somebody did find our hidden item last week, so good work. Way to be attentive. So our new story, I kind of gave you a preview last week a little bit, is called Operation Alca. And it's a brand new story. It's only been in print for a couple years, so I'm really excited about it. I'm not super familiar with the story, so it's a new one to me too, which is kind of fun. And so we'll go ahead and get started. Now, we're gonna start by first of all thinking back. What would you say if I asked you, what is a Bible? You'd probably be like, well, it's a book, it has a lot of words in it. Hopefully you bring it to church with you when you go to church. It has things from God, stories, lots of things like that. Well, what if you didn't even know what a Bible was? What if you've never seen one? Or what if you've never even seen a book? So the people group that we're going to talk about today, that's kind of what it was like for them. They had never seen a book. They didn't know what a Bible was. They didn't really know who God was or who God is and what He has done for them. And actually, this isn't the only people group like that. There's a lot of people around the world that just don't know. But we're going to talk about this group specifically. We're going to talk about the Auca Indians. They lived in Ecuador, the country we were talking about a little bit ago. Not in the same area where we were talking. They were living out in the jungles. And they didn't have books or phones or houses or school. They didn't have a lot of the same stuff that we have. Their lives were a little bit more simple, but they didn't know any different and it didn't really bother them. But the kids are like normal kids. They like to play games. So here's a couple kids, and they were playing a game in the river, like hide and seek, or how long can you hold your breath underwater. And one of the kids, Dayuma is one of the girls we're going to talk about, she would hold her breath and her friend would count for her, see how long she could hold it. Well, I could hold it longer, but you know, let's keep going. So they would play games like that, or they would see if they could follow parrots in the jungle, or they listen for monkeys and try to chase them through the jungle. They like to do things like that. Those are fun things for them to do, fun ways to play. And one of their favorite things to do was to watch Dayuma's dad go hunting, and he would go hunting for monkeys. Monkey meat was one of Dayuma's favorite foods. Now that kind of sounds strange to us, but it was normal to them. I'm sure some of the foods we eat would be strange to them, but they really liked eating monkey meat. Now, Dayuma's family lived in a big hut with a lot of other families. So it's not just one house for each person. They all lived together in a big group, and they didn't have tables or chairs or beds. They would have a hammock, and that would be a way for them to sit, like maybe while they're working and cooking on the fire or talking to their neighbors, and somewhere for them to sleep at night. And Dayuma would spend a lot of time in her house with her family. They would play with some of the monkeys, maybe they would have snacks for later, or they would just sit and talk. And she really liked to sit and talk with her grandpa. And her grandfather would tell her things about their family, about the people, and he also told her, Dayuma, we were made by a God. A God made us. He made the trees. He made the people. He made the animals. And then God went back to heaven, and he will never come back again. And that was strange to Dayuma. That didn't make sense, why a God would make things but he wouldn't come back. And she had a lot of questions, but she didn't really know. And she didn't know that God had sent his son Jesus to die for her and that he loved her. One of the reasons that Dayuma and her people didn't know much about Jesus was that the Auca people, were really not very friendly. They were warriors, and they did a lot of fighting. And actually the name Auca means, that wasn't really their name. It's a savage name. It means naked savage. Not a nice word at all. But that was the name that people called them because they were always fighting with each other. Themselves, the people called themselves Waldoni because that just meant the people, their people group. But they would fight each other. So if somebody died, they would run off to another village and they would kill the person. And then somebody from that person's family would come back to their village and kill somebody else. And it would keep going back and forth and back and forth. And if somebody new came into their village, somebody from the outside, from the city, they would kill them right away. That was just how they lived. They were always afraid of each other. They were always fearful that something was going to happen. And Dayuma was scared too. She didn't know when somebody would just walk into their village and be ready to kill somebody else. It's kind of a scary way to live. But that was their lives. That's just what they knew. They didn't know any better. That's just how they lived. Well, it seems like these people would be so dangerous and so scary that no one would care about them. But you know what? God does care about them. God cares about all people groups. And far, 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 far away from the Auca Indians was a boy named Nate and his sister Rachel. And Nate lived in the state of Pennsylvania. He grew up there, and his sister would read stories to him, and he loved hearing missionary stories about what missionary people did around the world, how God rescued them from crazy situations, and he always saying, one more story, just one more story. And Rachel would read another story to him, and he loved hearing all these stories about the missionaries. Well, as Nate grew up, he was a very curious child. He liked to do all sorts of things, and he especially liked to build things. He built a toy train, he built a toy sailboat, and he even built a toy airplane that was 6 feet long, like 6 feet from wing to wing, and it even glided through the air. It was pretty cool. As he grew up, he began to try to look at new things, like his family's car. And his family even let him take the car apart, and he figured out how all the pieces went together, took it all the way apart, and it took him 3 days to put it back together. But guess what? It still worked after all that. God had given Nate some really cool skills to be able to figure things out and figure out how things worked. And Nate really loved airplanes most of all. His older brother was a pilot. So as Nate got older, he got to ride with his brother in the airplane, and sometimes his brother would let him fly the airplane a little bit, and he thought that was so cool. He wanted to be a pilot when he grew up. But Nate realized there was something even more important than just the things he liked, than just being a pilot. He realized that God was more important than everything else. And he trusted Jesus as his Savior and trusted that God was in control and God had a plan. He really, really wanted to be a pilot though. But his sister, Rachel, said, you know, Nate, you know so much about God and you love him, and I really think you should be a missionary. I think you should tell other people about God. But Nate wasn't so sure about that. He really loved airplanes and he really wanted to be a pilot. But he prayed about it and he thought about it, and he really did love people. But deep down, his deepest desire was that he really wanted to fly planes. But he told God, if you want me to be a missionary, I will be a missionary, even though he loved airplanes so much. Well, what do you think? Do you think God could use his love for airplanes and for flying and fixing things and have him be a missionary? And what about Dayuma? Will her people ever hear about God? Will they ever know that Jesus loves them and cares about them? You have to come back next time and find out the next part of the story.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah?
I like airplanes. I just wish I could fly one like him.
Oh, that would be fun.
Okay, the next few weeks we are going to look at some people around the world who Alyssa especially knows well. And so today we are going to look at someone named... what?
JR Dudek. He is one of my Arriba teammates from Peru. We went down to Peru together back in 2012. But he's back in Peru now as a missionary. So here's JR. He is living and serving in Puerto Maldonado, which is kind of in the southern part of Peru. Southern, more inland, more jungly area. So here's a picture of when we were on Arriba together.
Such little babies.
I'm all the way to the far right, and he's right beside me. And so we were in Peru for a year, just doing some different studies, learning to speak Spanish, and he really developed a heart for Peru, and especially for the kids. He loves doing children's ministry, and he especially loves soccer, and it's cool to see how God has used that in the ways he gets to serve. So here's a map to help you see exactly where Puerto Maldonado is, down in the southern part of Peru. So some of the things he told us is he has a lot of different ministries actually where he gets to build relationships with kids. And that's kind of a cool thing. Lots of kids in Peru, and they're just kind of out and about. Well, probably not as much right now, but typically they're just kind of out and about. Wherever there's a play area, you'll probably find a few kids just hanging out. One of the ways he's able to build relationships is through a Christian library that he's in charge of down there. It's a place where kids can come and they can get some help with their homework, and they have fun activities to do during the week. He said they even have a Bible class twice a week, which gives them the opportunity to share the gospel with the kids who come to their library. And it's been cool to see how God's provided different books and supplies and stuff for their library. Really cool to see that. Another way that he is able to build relationships with the kids is through a soccer club. Each week they have a soccer club 2 times, and the goal is to be able to build relationships with the boys to share the gospel with them. And soccer is a big part of the sporting life in Peru.
Smart people.
Yeah, they love it. It's cool to have an indoor cancha like that.
And that's a nice one too.
It's a really nice one.
Wow.
And they've even got their fancy little uniforms on and everything. Soccer is everything.
You have to have one of those if you're there.
You bet. Another way that he's building relationship with kids is through Bible clubs that they have on Saturdays.
Ouch.
Well, I'm gonna guess this is a castigo. It's a punishment. So if you lose the game, they get to do something to you. So that would be my guess. This was his punishment. They put the clothespins on him. It says each Saturday they have 2 clubs in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. Bible club is a fun time of playing games, singing songs, and most importantly, learning about the Bible. Oh, that looks pretty typical. That's kind of cool. Lots of kids that get to come from the nearby area, and if you just have an event, kids will just show up, or they'll be walking by on the outside and just join in on the fun, even if you didn't like go right out there and invite them. He says some of the coolest things about living in Puerto Maldonado is that they're completely surrounded by a jungle. So with a short ride out of town via boat or car, you can see some really beautiful parts of God's creation. You can see things like monkeys and parrots and toucans in their streams, or maybe you might see one of these little guys.
What?
I don't want to run into that out on the river.
Just a little froggy.
I don't think so. He says you can find piranhas and other types of cool fish that people want to buy in pet stores in the U.S. And how about that little guy up in the trees? It's a cute little monkey. They look cute, but they're really noisy. Super noisy.
Do they try to take your food too?
I never encountered
I
that.
know there's some monkeys that come and try to steal your food.
Maybe if they're like super people friendly. So here's some more jungly type looking stuff. Definitely looks very jungly.
Whoa.
Big trees. And
mushrooms.
Those are turtles.
Oh. Well.
Not mushrooms.
You know.
JR says that children like to spend their time playing with their friends. Maybe some video games. Looks like he's got some buddies there playing games with him.
Probably Mario Kart.
Maybe. Probably like the classics. They also like to play at parks with their friends and soccer. And they really like video games like you guys, like Fortnite and Free Fire.
Free Fire? What is Free Fire?
I don't know, but I guess they like it.
I must be way out of what's going on with kids these days because I have no idea what that is.
You have to ask your kids when we get back to church.
I don't think they've even talked about it. Never mind, keep going.
They also like to fish and go swimming. That makes sense since they're kind of close to the water. Lots of swimming time, it looks like. Well, with everything that's going on right now with the virus, they're not able to have a lot of their same ministries that they normally do. And so JR is asking that we would pray that during this difficult time, he can continue to show the love of Jesus to people by helping to provide for their daily needs with food and shelter. And I think recently a church blessed them with some money and they were able to give out some food to the people in the area. I saw a video of it, handing out lots of rice and lentils and stuff to help with people that just don't have anything right now because of everything going on.
That's probably the case in a lot of different countries down there right now.
Yeah, I would think so. So that's JR. Can just pray for him this week in his ministry down in Peru. Nice. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Next week we have another one of Alyssa's friends, so you'll have to come back for that. Yep. As she mentioned, if you haven't found it yet, we have something in our setup today that we have not had before. So good job to those of you who found it last time. See if you can find it this week. And if you enjoy this, please share with others, like it, ask us questions down below. Let us know if there's a country you'd like us to talk about. Maybe we've been there, maybe we haven't. There's a good chance Alyssa has. So if there's one you'd like to hear about sometime, let us know that.
Yep.
But we will see you next week with more exciting stories and pictures and new friends to make. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.